Heather, could you call, we'll call the meeting order. Heather, could you do the roll?
Sure. Stephen Borgsdorf.
Progress.
If you could state that where you're calling in from and that you're here.
Looks like Steve is muted.
I'm sorry. I'm just trying to catch back up here. I am present. I'm in Ann Arbor.
Okay, great. Alan Heber.
Yes, I'm here just back from Berkeley, California, but in Ann Arbor with a sore throat.
Okay.
Ellen, could you mute your phone too? We're getting some background noise.
It looks like too he's on just needs to be promoted to a panelist on Zoom, and then he can probably hang up his phone.
All right. Thank you. All right, I'm promoting you to panelist, Alan. Congratulations. You should be able to, hopefully you should be able to connect in. In the meantime, Sarah Hammerschmidt.
Here from Ann Arbor.
All right. Jeffrey Henning. He was here. All right, maybe he'll connect back in. Rita Mitchell.
Here in Ann Arbor.
Great. Alice Rell.
Here in Ann Arbor.
Frank Wilhelm.
Here in Ann Arbor.
Adam Zemke.
Here in Ann Arbor.
Councilmember Briggs.
Here in Ann Arbor.
And Councilmember Dish.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
Mhm.
If we could have approval of the agenda, motion to approve the agenda. Heather sent it out this afternoon, and it's posted on Lucky Star.
So moved.
So moved. Seconded by Councilmember Briggs. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Thank you. Motion carries. Approval of the minutes from last meeting. Those are linked in the agenda. Could we have a motion, please?
They look good to me. I'd move their approval.
Excellent. Thank you, Steve. Seconded by Rita. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, motion carries. We'll go into the public comment then. Heather, are there any members of the public wishing to comment?
Yes, we've got Robert Black. Go ahead.
Can you hear me, Heather?
Yeah,
There's
got a
some
little bit
feedback in the
of
system
back
that
feed
sounds
though.
like-
I don't know if that can be changed.
Yeah, maybe somebody's unmuted or not muted. Thank you. Can you hear me okay? It's a weird thing. I'll turn my volume down.
Yeah, it's still echoing.
For some
Okay.
reason, you're showing twice as an attendee, so I'm not sure if that's why it's.
Yeah, there's somebody else who's got something going on. Thank you for letting me speak tonight. I'm in Ann Arbor doing my annual teaching at the Steiner High School and working on some projects on the south side of town. And it's very good to see you guys. I went over to the center of the city today, and there's a lot of cars parked on that area, and it's very different when there are many cars in there. But I'd like to speak tonight in particular about agenda item number 8, condensing working groups. First of all, let me say, as I've been talking in every meeting about alignment, alignment, I have seen great progress with you guys in terms of finding alignment within your group. The spirit of camaraderie and organized collaboration is very heartening for me to see, and progress is imminent, even more so than you've been doing. I suggest as you move forward toward the RFP that you really try to continue this alignment with out beyond just the group itself. As you did with the use of outside experiences in your comparable communities group, my suggestion is to work on integrating that knowledge base into the RFP in some way. There's a great intelligence there available for you. Also, I mentioned many times the report of the task force. It has yet, in my opinion, to be harvested in any meaningful way to be organized into the basis for the RFP. Also to use nearby resources, which you're doing a good job already with the Parks Department. The PROS report is very good. The presentation by Jessica Black and others for Liberty Plaza was very helpful. To the extent you can capture those experiences, harvest them, and organize them into your basis for the RFP, I think all will be better because of that. The same thing, I mentioned the task force report, really harvest that. And I don't see that there's been a lot of work to capture that. There's a great wealth of knowledge in there. And then also in terms of alignment and reaching out to other resources, the initiating committee has carried on from the task force and has a great wealth of people, interest, and information that can be helpful and should be useful as part of preparation for the RFP. And that also includes the Library Green Conservancy and the outreach to fundraising, which I was a little extravagant in my factor of 10 over public financing, but I don't think it'll be 100, but I think it could easily be 10 as a 10x multiplier. So to include those people in your background research and have a much more highly collaborative and integrated approach to developing the RFP. And that would include Milton, Mr. Dehoney, the manager, who's now, I understand, working on the Ann Arbor 200 work. You found that the library itself has had an Ann Arbor 200 project. So let's get those aligned so that goal of the major 200th anniversary of Ann Arbor is a big deal. The sesquicentennial from 1974 has a wealth of information in it, which you saw in one of the RFI responses that talks about that. And also the basis of Ann Arbor Parks with the Olmsted brothers. We have a great resource in Caitlin Olmsted Phillips that will bring that connection. And if you could emphasize those, you will build a public outreach, I believe, that will be helpful in this endeavor. So tonight, as you approach agenda item 8, I encourage you to really organize the future space design under Mr. Zemke's, Chair Zemke's leadership, and also harvest the learning from the Green Team and what other activities will happen in the current space activation under Rita Mitchell. So good luck tonight, and I look forward to hearing your good collaboration. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Thanks for calling in. Any other members of the public, Heather? You are muted, Heather.
Hello?
Caller ending in 464. I think you are able to speak now.
Yeah, can you hear me?
We can.
Oh, good. Okay, so my name is Linda Brower, and I am calling to speak to your agenda item review of the PROS plan, the Parks, Recreation, and Open Space Plan. And I have two requests because I know you're going to review it, and I guess you can make recommendations back to the Parks Department if you think any changes are needed. And I would encourage two things. One, I should also back up and say that I spent 6 years as a Parks Commissioner, and I was chair of the Parks Commission for 3 years. And I was involved in writing 2 of the PROS plan. So I'm very familiar with the PROS plan. And in the past, at the beginning, when it talks about, like, it describes the community and the different sections of the city and kind of the demographics, we always had a table that I think there's the central area planning, which includes the downtown business district and the surrounding areas. That's one area. And then, there's northeast and southeast and northwest, et cetera, et cetera. And the PROS plan discusses the needs in each of those areas. But before that more in-depth discussion, it always had a table that you could eyeball. It had each area of the city, the population, and the square miles for that area, and then a ratio of the population to the number of parks, the square acreage to the number of parks. So you could see by eyeballing it where the deficiencies are in the different areas of the city, because obviously equity is a concern when it comes to access to parkland. So in the current PROS plan, I didn't see that there. And I think that's very, very important, because when you eyeball it, you can clearly see that the central planning area, which includes the DDA district and the State Street area, the surrounding area, is very deficient in parkland. And I think that's really relevant to what you guys are trying to do in terms of developing activation as a public space in the center of the city. And I think that kind of background information that's so easy to see because it's in a very clear table is really important to put back in there. So I would ask that you recommend that when you send your feedback back to the Parks Department about the pros plan. And my second request, I haven't had a chance to go through it with a fine tooth comb, and I know that Center of the City is mentioned in the pros plan, but I don't think it gives enough strong support to encourage the Parks Department to work with you guys, the Council of the Commons, to cooperate to get something really going there sooner rather than later, and to encourage the DDA to kick in some funds for that, and to encourage the park to help staff any ideas that you might want to develop. So I think that's another recommendation you can make. And it does show the survey results do show significant public support for that. For example, out of the top 13 most improvements wanted, beautifying the center of the city, the library lot, was number 7 out of 13. And that's just the top 13. There's even more, things that people want. And then also, I think it's survey question number 2, downtown parks were rated as the 6th most used type of park. That comes after neighborhood parks, farmers market, natural areas, the B2B trail, and Argo Cascades. And after that came downtown parks. So people are using it, but we don't have enough of them. So not having enough of them gets back to, my request to put the table in there showing what a paucity of parks there are in the central business area. And so I just would encourage you to request those 2 changes when you give your feedback back to the Parks Department about the pros plan. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mrs. Brower. Heather, are there any other callers? Heather, you're muted.
Sorry. Yes, we do. The person with the phone number ending in 534, you should be able to talk now.
Hello, this is Tom Stahlberg calling from Lowertown in Ann Arbor. I'd like to support what the other 2 callers said. By the way, I'm on the Bicentennial Committee. We are working under Milton Mahoney, our city administrator, along with the Ann Arbor District Library, and a pretty powerful group of people there. And when I say powerful, I mean in terms of capability. So I'm really looking forward to being able to plan over the next year for the Bicentennial. In 2024, there'll be events scheduled throughout the year of 2024. And I'm looking forward to having some of those events in our center of the city. Something I'd like to reinforce in terms of the need for park space downtown and have that reflected in the pros plan is the current density that's being developed downtown. Right now, 616 East Washington's under construction. That'll be the tallest building built in over 50 years. And on the old Y lot right across the street from the library and that block, we have an approval for an up to 275-foot tall building, which would be much taller than 616 East Washington at about 205 feet. And there's more coming. And we know the standard was just completed. There's plans to build the city to build on the Polio lot. And there'll be other private development downtown too. And council, I guess, is taking a look, or at least having a resolution to encourage some other potential development on the federal building right on the same block as the old Y lot next to the transit center. All the people that might be moving downtown, that are likely to be moving downtown, are certainly entitled to a park space there, as well as the rest of the citizens. I just came back from Stratford, Ontario, my other home, and we got one there. It's a city of 32,000 people, and it took a while and some couple of iterations of drawing up plans and having the citizens involved and looking at different plans. And there were some brilliant ideas that were far out there and expensive. And there were some more modest ideas. And one of the more modest ones was selected, and it's worked out well. There's a carousel right now in the back of Town Hall right there in their market square. And there'll be other holiday festivities celebrated there. So they can do it, we can do it. I've seen it happen. And I'm really encouraged by the work that your committee has been doing. So I hope that can be dovetailed and tailored into the PROS plan and make it as strong as possible, that we will have park space, communal space, whatever it looks like, we don't know, about in the heart of our city, that we can all celebrate together during our bicentennial in 2024, or at least the beginning of what it might be. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stolbert. Thanks for calling in. Anyone else, Heather?
That is it for now.
Okay, excellent. Thank you so much.
Can I just say, I'm sorry, I got thrown off the, Heather, did you get me down? Jeff Hay.
Oh yeah, you were thrown off for a minute, but you're back. Okay, great. I'll mark you as here.
Thank you.
All right,
Sure.
thanks, Jeff. Okay, well, we have a robust agenda this evening, and the first item on the agenda is to hear from our new, well, I guess sort of new by comparison. He's been around a little while in his current role, library director. And I asked him, we've had a chance to converse a few times, and asked him if he would come and speak to us a little bit about the events that the library has done, in particular the outside events. And they've been really knocking it out of the park with things. And so I just wanted to turn it over to you, Eli. Thank you so much for being here this evening.
Certainly. Thank you for the invitation, Adam. How long would you like me to speak? I want to make sure I don't set your agenda behind.
It's a few, 10 minutes or less, I suppose.
Sounds great. Okay, so just to kind of set the stage, because often people don't necessarily understand the scope of the Ann Arbor District Library. We are an organization that operates 7 locations. We serve a service population of 172,000 people. That includes the city of Ann Arbor and parts of 7 townships. So the jurisdiction of the Ann Arbor District Library is larger than the city of Ann Arbor. We serve a larger population than the city of Ann Arbor does as well. We operate on an annual revenue of about $20 million a year. We employ 230 employees across all of our locations. And in 2019, our last sort of pre-pandemic year, we produced 2,500 events for the public just in the 2018-2019 fiscal year. At those 2,500 events, we had about 170,000 attendees across all of those events. And in that same year, we had 1.7 million visits to all of our facilities, including 600,000 visits just to the downtown library, which is about the number of people who visit the Big House annually, if you count the number of people that actually show up, as opposed to what the scoreboard says. So if you keep that in perspective, it's easy to see the downtown library is a major anchor for the community. We have a lot of things going on here. So what we've actually done outdoors on the near the downtown library, back in 2017, when there was the near eclipse in the middle of the summer, we had a large event that took over the entire parking lot. And we had easily 1,000, 1,500 people there. It was a total madhouse. It was a very underwhelming event because it was not much of an eclipse. Considering how far away we were. There was absolute madhouse attempting to get the eclipse glasses, the limited supply that we had, distributed out to everyone. But once everyone saw that it wasn't really all that exciting to look at, we had a wonderful time. Everybody had a great time out on the event. But it was also, we were kind of spilling over the edges. It was a little bit too, not quite enough space for the audience that had attended. We also, just in summer of 2021, just when we were starting to do programming again and still very focused on doing programming exclusively outdoors to minimize COVID risk, we did a Richard Simmons Sweating with the Oldies event projected on the side of our building, and we used the street itself, Library Lane, we had an audience of about 60 or 70 young people who love Richard Simmons came and did a routine along with him. It was not here live, of course. It was just watching a video, but many of them were dressed up, and it was a very successful event. We had a good time there. And those are really the only two events that we've done that use any space that isn't our property. At the bottom of the ramp on the north side facing the center of the city, we do have what we call the pad, fairly decently sized concrete space. We set up a tent on that space fairly frequently for library story times, particularly during the pandemic when we were trying to avoid doing those indoors. That's a tent space that's roughly 20 by 40, and allows us to easily accommodate an audience of about 60 or 70, which is about 2/3 of what turn out typically for a story time at the library. And then also when we had this past summer, one of our annual events is the Ann Arbor Comic Arts Festival. When we had that, we had some vendors who still wanted to have outside locations due to ongoing COVID risks. So we did set up the tents. We had a craft program as well as some of our vendors on the pad there at the bottom of the ramp at the downtown library. And that's what we've done so far. I will say we don't have a lot of plans to utilize the space at present. As the organization that has put on the largest events on that space, we don't find it a very suitable space for our needs for library programming. Our programming professionals and the people who are involved in that, it's a very noisy space, particularly in the summer. Part of that is our own equipment, which is located right there, some of our HVAC equipment, which is right there on Library Lane. The other part is just the volume of traffic on Fifth Avenue. Particularly, it's wonderful. We love being so close to a transit center, but it makes it hard to do outdoor events because of the amount of noise that it comes with the buses going by. That will certainly improve as the buses change to electric, but at present, there's a lot of times when it's very hard to have a successful event because of the amount of noise just associated with Fifth Avenue. The traffic risk makes us very nervous. When we talk about doing events for toddlers or preschoolers on our pad, we typically have a gauntlet of library staff standing alongside the curb to Fifth Avenue so we can catch any runners before they run out into traffic. So generally overall, when the library does programs, we prefer to do them indoors. It's easier for us to control the environment. It's easier for us to make sure that the audience is having a good experience. All of our infrastructure is in there. It's a lot more cost effective for us to produce events inside. And really, at this point, I think the major opportunity would be if there was another wave or another pandemic or something like that, where we had a higher desire to move events outdoors that otherwise would have been indoors. But overall, at this point, we mostly, with occasional things happening on the pad when something needs to be outdoors. At present, we don't have any particular plans for programming on Library Lane. We have an excellent relationship with the Ann Arbor Summer Festival. We do lots of programming over there. It's it's not far away from us. It's a much better, more conducive location for the types of events we like to put on. We have concerts over there. We do trivia. We've done Bob Ross, paint along with Bob Ross over there. We've done letterpress printing under their tent. And we find a much larger audience there than anything that we've done right outside our own door, just because of the location and the comfort and the proximity to other amenities. So that's kind of in a nutshell, the library's current programming, what our plans are. There's been some mention of the bicentennial. As some of you may know, the library is running its own project called AA 200, where during the bicentennial year, we will release 200 new pieces of content, all about the history of Ann Arbor over the 200 years, focusing mostly on stories that people haven't heard before, have been underrepresented communities, underrepresented stories. Everybody's sick of the apocryphal tale about how the town was named, which isn't even really true as far as any historians can tell. So we're trying to make sure that we are covering different stories and doing them in creative ways. Just to give you an example, there's a wonderful story that also may be apocryphal about just before the Second World War, when Niels Bohr and another physicist were here at a nuclear physics conference in Ann Arbor. And the story was that, I think it was actually, what's his name? I've forgotten his name. The physicist who the Michigan nuclear plant is named for. There was a conversation reportedly at the Pretzel Bell between Niels Bohr and the other physicist, trying to convince him not to help the Nazis develop a nuclear weapon. And what we're thinking about doing is one of the 200 pieces of content that we'll produce for the bicentennial is to have a play written by some experts and historians about that conversation, and then produce that play and record it. So it's not all just about articles or photographs or things like that, though there's certainly a lot of that. We're looking to get artists and playwrights and creative people involved and have something engaging for lots of different communities that tell parts of the story of the town that haven't been heard before. So that's what we plan to do for the bicentennial, produce a lot of content that then will live in perpetuity. We're very inspired by some of the things that were done for the sesquicentennial. We have a lot of the documentation, the newspaper they produced, all sorts of the things from that time. And we're looking forward to sort of building upon that for the bicentennial, producing a lot of content that wouldn't have existed otherwise. So that's in a nutshell what the library is up to. If anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
So Eli, Jeff Henney, were you referring to Heisenberg?
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. Yes, I think it was a conversation between Heisenberg and Niels Bohr.
Any other questions at all for Director Nieberger?
Just a comment. Thank you. That was amazing.
Steve, you
Yes,
had
and I'd like to thank you too for coming in.
It was
It
my
was such a
pleasure. Thank you for the
compact and
opportunity.
interesting 10 minutes.
Yeah, it was great. I guess my question is, we heard about the reasons why for the library that space doesn't quite make sense for your needs.
Sure.
Do you have thoughts one way or the other about what type of activities or parking or whatever is there? Do you have sort of views about what you'd like to see?
I will say we absolutely hear about the parking. When the lot is closed to parking, we absolutely hear about it from our patrons. Absolutely. There's still, from some people, reluctance to use the underground lot. There's still a majority of people who visit the downtown library come here in a personal vehicle. There's just no getting around that reality. We wish it were otherwise, but that's definitely the case. So whenever there's any impact to the parking surrounding the library, we hear about it from the patrons. We always want to encourage people to use the buses. As people know, during our summer game, we negotiated a project with the Ann Arbor Area Transit Authority so that people could board the buses for free on weekends all summer using their library card. That later was expanded to include the Ypsilanti District Library. So we're very pro-transit, but the reality is that most of our patrons come here in personal transportation. So when the lot's closed, we hear about it. It's part of that equation. But overall, we have so much infrastructure for producing comfortable events 20 meters away. It's not very frequent that we would have an event that would be better outdoors than it would be inside. Some of the things that we do outside, like, for example, there's a tie-dyeing event that we do at one of our branches. That's something that works well out there, but then people want to have free parking, right? So the branches tend to work better for that sort of thing. Another example, sometimes we do star parties after night. It's much too bright downtown for that sort of thing to work. We tend to do that on offsite locations. So the few things that we have our big event every summer at Vets Park, and that's something that requires way more space than there's anything downtown, or that even West Park would accommodate. So there's lots of programming and public engagement. Either we already have the infrastructure inside the building, or the space available right next door isn't sufficient. When we did our event at Vets Park, typically draws 1,800 to 2,000 people.
Well, I was there.
Yeah. So, it's a big event. It takes up a lot of space.
Yeah.
And so it's just about the infrastructure, the proximity, and having really also parking and places that people are familiar with. We hate to have to think about parking, but it's still something that we definitely hear about from patrons. Does that answer your question?
Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks.
Thank you, Steve.
Alice?
I was just thinking about what parking was there before the underground parking structure was available. Wasn't that much, I don't think.
It was a little bit more than what's there now on the surface. The lot that was there, there's some, but that was the most common place that people would park. There's still some confusion about whether people can actually park on the old Y lot currently. Some people don't feel comfortable with that because they're not sure. It's fine. It's not too big of a deal. I just remark that it is certainly something that we hear about from our patrons when parking is impacted near the library.
Right. Do you think that free parking for the library in the underground would help at all?
I mean, it'd help a little bit, but it's also not something that the library is interested in subsidizing.
Okay.
That's not how library tax dollars should be spent. We prefer to spend that on infrastructure and access to public services.
Ellen, you are muted.
I have a sore throat, so I'm a little muted even when I'm not muted. But I just do want to note that we've had events of Earth Day and Peace Day and other events there that have been quite engaging with the public, and concerts. And the space is accommodatable to public events and as a casual use, as a place for tables and people to meet and sort of be a downtown park and gathering area is quite feasible. The surface was not intended as a parking lot. It was always seen as temporary until a permanent use was identified. And that's what indeed the voters did identify, that having a place of gathering and occasional programs is a benefit for the city, and Wi-Fi and such for gathering would be a great benefit, and that could better be allied with the library. But mainly it seemed like the library sees that as a gathering place as bringing more problems than benefits. And I think that is a problem, a situation that can be dealt with in a more beneficial way than saying, turn that back into housing or turn that back into a parking lot. It's clearly not going to remain as a parking lot if the common somehow is undermined. The voices for a conference center or a luxury complex or some sort, or even affordable housing. Definitely see that as not a place where parking is the highest priority, and the city's policy sees that parking is not the highest priority. So that is something that the library, as well as all the institutions of the city, need to deal with in terms of developing a non-motorized culture in the city. It does not happen instantaneously, but it does require the cooperation of the various centers of power and programming. So I wish that there would be more sense of that cooperation, and also some sense of how we actually see having a public space in the center of town as dovetailed with an improved policy toward the houseless people and transients, and who see the center of the city as a natural gathering place. So I just want to put from my experience.
Well, and to be clear, the library we are not asking for there to be parking on that lot. I'm just mentioning that when there isn't, we hear about it from our patrons.
Yeah.
That's all I'm saying. And the other thing I would just want to add is that if library events had turnout on the scale of what you've had on the lot, it would be very realistic for us to do events over there. But when we have a library event, the turnout is on a very different scale than what has happened so far on the lot. And it makes it unrealistic for that to happen on that type of space.
All right. Thank you, both of you. Councilmember Briggs, and then we're going to wrap it up here.
That's good. Thanks. Talked long enough that I did think of a question. So one of the things that the commission has recommended is to explore a kind of in a temporary nature, a food court on that space and activating in that manner, and also with kind of events for small musical events and things like that. And I'm just curious, obviously this is something that staff is researching, understanding what the sort of operational model and cost and all that sort of stuff are associated with it. But just from your perspective, you've spoken to the sort of a patron's desire for, parking, which of course that makes sense. But I'm just curious if you have any thoughts about that particular usage. You may not have considered it, contemplated it too much.
It's interesting because we would love it, especially our staff would love it, for there to be, a standard food presence on top of the structure. However, like when we have had food trucks come to our own events, they don't make a lot of money, and it's like there's just not a lot of foot traffic Even when we're having a large event, just to put that in perspective, we have an event that we do every year called Visions, which is a assistive technology fair for people with visual impairments. And we get, 500, 600 attendees to this event, but we have to pay Ray's Red Hots to come and sell hot dogs to it because they will not do enough business to make it worth their while all by themselves. There have in the past been some hot dog carts that have set up shop outside the downtown library, and usually they only last a couple weeks. There's just not enough traffic currently with the current set of things that are happening on this block for those to become viable businesses. That said, we'd love to see it happen, but I think that it's a challenge for a business to be successful without subsidy on this block, just because of the amount of foot traffic.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Okay. Very good. Any other questions at all, or we can bid the director of the library farewell for the evening? Okay.
Can I ask a quick one? Maybe it's not quick.
Yeah.
And sorry if you said this. I was having huge internet problems before, but am I misremembering that there is going to be a new library built soon?
That'd be awesome.
Oh, so
there is no current project. Yeah,
okay.
There's no current project for a new downtown library. We've done some feasibility studies. There was a bond issue in 2012, which was not successful, but there are not currently plans for a new downtown library. That said, this building was first built in 1958, added on to in 1971, and again in 1989, and we are just about out of what we can do with this building.
Okay. Well, when there is plans for a new one, depending on where we are with this, I have some thoughts, but we will just leave it at that. I don't know where I thought that. Maybe it was the feasibility study. Thank you so much.
It's in my dreams, that's for sure.
Hopefully they come true.
Thank you.
All right. Very good. Thank you so much, Eli. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
All right. We're going to move on to our next speaker. And that is Jeff Crockett, who's going to present around some of the volunteer gardening activities that are going on and have been going on for quite some time now. And he did include a slide deck in the agenda. I don't think he's going to spend time on every slide, but he definitely included a lot of things there as well. And so Jeff, same amount of time or so, 10 or 12 minutes, if you wouldn't mind. We really appreciate you being here.
Thank you very much. Can you all see this slide presentation? Okay, yep. Can you hear me? Okay, you can hear me. Okay, great. First of all, I'm just ecstatic because we had, I think I reported to this group last year about our first year. And during the first year, we had 2 garden plots, started to plant a whole bunch of beautiful perennials. But we also documented over 400 volunteer hours. And it is easily surpassed by what's happening this year. And I would hazard the guess that there were at least 80 separate work events over the past 2 years. So I can say with great certainty that the Commons has been activated quite regularly over 80 times over the past 2 years. And we've spent a lot of time on the Commons, and it has been a blast. While we were there, people have come up, asked about the plants and flowers. It's been a ball. But what I would say is that before I get into this, and I'm not going to go over every slide, is that what we're doing is not just about planting plants. Really, what we're doing is building community. And we're building community by supporting A20, by offering educational opportunities that will grow. And the other motivation for us is just giving back to Ann Arbor. And we are very excited about the prospect of expanding the gardens. But I will go through this presentation. I'm not going to go too much into the timeline. These are things that you can read. But basically, we've expanded from 2 to 4 garden plots this year, working through the DDA. We have at least 15 volunteers who have actually probably over a total of 20 over the past couple of years. Some people have dropped out, but we've added new people this year, very active. You can see on the right side of this slide that the green team has taken over 4 plots, while the DDA has the remainder of plots around the site. So here is the leadership team: Elizabeth Smith, Odile Huguenot-Haber, Rita Mitchell, myself, and Joette Rioma from Project Grow. I'm not going to list all the volunteers, but it's interesting because I put together a Meet the Green Team presentation that I'll send you at another time, but it's amazing the variety and depth of the backgrounds of the people who are involved in here. And I think it's important for you to understand the people and the motivation. Why are people have spent over 800 hours in the past 2 years toward developing a garden? I think it's important for you to know that. And I hope that will become clear once we get through this presentation. Partially, this is about building community partnerships, and we have done so with Project Grow, and we attended the 50-year anniversary of Project Grow, and you can see Joette and our leadership team there, and Wild Ones is in addition this year, with the thanks of Rita Mitchell and Robert Greasy and his team of Wild Ones have been involved in planting plants. It's been great, and they have educated all of us on the importance of native plants to attract pollinators. We're developing signage because part of what has to happen, we planted probably about 65 to 70 different native plants, all right? So the long-term vision is for people to understand what these plants are so that they can come and then say, hey, I really like that plant. This is what it is. I'd like to plant that at home. And frankly, this is what has happened to me personally. And I have adopted the ethic and mentality of Wild Ones, and I've already enlisted help for Rita to taking our front extension and turning it over to native plants. And that's going to take some time, but we're committed to doing this. So, I mean, it's not just about doing something on the commons. It's about taking the information and applying it at home. And when you get a whole bunch of people doing that, that's going to significantly support A20 in terms of attracting pollinators around the city. We also got help from Wabjon and Julie Ritter, owners of Your Factory, who donated this wonderful sign. We started off last year, we harvested some of the sunflower seeds, and I went ahead and put them in, watered the seed pods and grew, and we ended up harvesting over 20 sunflowers from last year's seeds as evidence of our belief in the importance of sustainability. We had a spring planning meeting, and basically we ended up cleaning up the lot, but also planning for what plants we were going to have. It takes a lot of time to do this, and but people are very enthusiastic. Irrigation, it was a significant challenge, and Erica, I added this to the slide here. It wasn't in the initial slide because I realized I forgot your help. You and Lisa did a great job of working with the PCA to help develop a very simple irrigation system. You can see in the middle right here, basically, it's a spigot that is in one of our plots that we have used to attach hoses to not only irrigate the plots next to it, but we figured out a way to extend the hoses to go ahead and irrigate C2. And what's important about that with native plants are pretty resistant, pretty tolerant, and hardy after the first year. The first year requires watering almost every day, and we did it. But it was a group effort, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But we appreciate the DDA for providing that spigot. That was critical. We also developed some art, banners. This one was designed by Robert Black and Amy Rowe that we used at our booth. This is a banner that we printed out and used at the front of our table to promote the Green Team and the community commons. We participated in Earth Day, as Alan discussed before, but notice the people who were there. I mean, we had Yusuf Rabi, Councilmember Kathy Griswold, Lisa Dish spoke at that time. We greatly appreciated that. And there in the middle is our booth. And then we had a big day in May, planting a whole bunch of native species. Thanks in particular to Rita Mitchell and Elizabeth Smith for doing a bang up job of planting. And it took a while, a number of different work sessions to do it, but as you'll see, it turned out very, very well. We added more plants in June. There is our savior, Alan, who is turning away native, I'm sort of joking here, invasive species. But in truth, last year when we took this over, there was poison ivy in a number of different locations. And we cleaned that up. The poison ivy is gone. So I think we've significantly improved the area. And then we participated in the Mayor's Green Fair in June. We went ahead and Joette Roma went over and got some wood chips, and we had a work session to spread the wood chips all over. Notice in the back how the wildflowers are going like crazy there at that particular time. And then in late June, the flowers are beginning to grow. You can see the new growth. And the interesting thing, folks, is we did not lose one plant that we planted. It's quite remarkable. And it was because of the irrigation. It was because of the volunteers and the staff coming out on a regular basis. And then in July, you can see that the wildflowers are really sort of taking off. The cosmos, and I'll go into the details of the individual plants in a little bit, but you can see that everything is growing like crazy and it's gorgeous. And we had people while we were there coming over all the time asking questions about what these flower varieties are. So there was a real demand for learning about native plants. That was evident from the times that we were there. And then Robert Black and Amy Rowe developed a handout that we passed out when we were at various events, like the Project Grow event. We are greatly appreciative of both of them. And Robert and Amy do not live in Ann Arbor. Robert lives in Vermont and Amy in North Carolina. So why are they involved? Think about it. They're involved because they're passionate about the commons, the notion of the commons, and about sustainability and about community development. Very impressive. And then as you can see in August, the plants continue to grow and are looking very healthy. I want to acknowledge that the Downtown Development Authority has about 12 or 13 different plots, but we offered to help clean up these plots that had been overgrown with weeds. But we went to Jeff Watson and said, we can help. And he found the money. And about a week later, they were all cleaned up and they look great. But they're not all native plants. And we are hoping to encourage the DDA to look at what they've done and to coordinate with the Green Team to focus on planting native plants that will attract pollinators. And so we're hoping to work with them to sort of change the direction of what they've done. They planted these plants maybe about 8 or 9 years ago, but the landscaper who initially planted them is no longer there. So they're not really familiar with what these plants are. And in line with our goal to be educational, we need to identify these plants too. So visitors coming from all over will see a circle of native plants and being able to know what they are. And this is, for your information, is sort of a list of the individual plants in our main area, N3. And just look at the result. I mean, when we went there in August, it's just spectacular. And I just love going over there. And I would, at some point next year, invite you to come over and take a look during the prime season. I mean, it's fantastic. And then other plants, and look at the wildflower mixes that are down on the bottom. A number of these plants are reseeded from the previous year, but it did not involve in adding new plants at all. They were reseeded, and which is what we want. Oh, and you'll notice that there are bees in this sunflower. So we saw evidence of bees and rabbits and birds all the time while we're there. So the native plants did attract the pollinators. It worked. And here is the area in Area 1. These are mostly replacements of turf grass and different kinds of grasses that Elizabeth Smith put together. How am I doing for time? You got about, can I do 5 minutes or?
You can go ahead and do 5 more minutes.
Okay, I will promise I'll be out of here in 5 minutes. Okay, here are some of the other plants that you can look at later. The entire list of native plants in Area C2, the photos of the result, more beautiful photos. And then in October, this was our winterization. And basically what we did is we took down a number of the plants that were annuals, and we cut off the sunflower stalks and put them over in compost, which will deteriorate over the winter, and we can spread that for mulch the following year with another set of volunteers. It was so much fun. And we have over 30 some donors. None of the plants involved money from the city. These were all individual donors. And 2 of the donors here were dead set against the commons until they came to the conclusion that because of the affordable housing building across the street, it made sense now to have the commons. And they completely flipped and they donated some plants. And I was absolutely thrilled about that. But notice the organizations and the local nurseries who donated. It was wonderful. Planning for 2023. We've also already talked about this. We would like to have signage on some of the different plots, not just for like an overview, but also to identify plant. That is going to involve a conversation with the DDA. And I'm hoping that we will have the support of the Council of the Commons for providing signage to indicate what all this is. We think that this site would be perfect for a mural. Murals are going up all over town. This is a public space. We have secured $10,000 in donations to have Mary Tiefels put a mural on that wall over to the left, but we need approval from the DDA. And they've expressed some reluctance about that because they're not sure what the direction of the Commons is going to be. I would encourage you to support putting art on some of these walls as part of the plan to activate the Commons. I would appreciate that consideration. We also want to expand the number of volunteer gardens. If you go to Kellogg Park in Plymouth, you will notice there are 20 or 30 different organizations that have adopted different garden plots. Why can't we do that here? It will really help with activation and buy-in. And by the way, when businesses do this, it's promoting their business as different kinds of organizations. I just think it's something we really seriously have to consider, and not just consider, but actively go out and court participation from various groups. We also want to reach out to other gardening organizations like the Michigan Master Gardener Association and get them involved. And finally, we would love to promote eco-friendly events on the Commons. There are cities that have an eco fair where in the springtime you have different landscapers, you have nurseries come and have displays, and people can come around and basically get information on who can do this work and see all these different choices in one spot. We think that this would be one great idea for activating the Commons, but we want to support others as well. Okay, and I would close with this. This is my favorite quote. I do this with almost all my presentations. Never Margaret Mead never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has, and that's what drives us every day. Thank you much. Thank you very much for your attention. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Jeff. Any questions at all? Jeff, if you could take your PowerPoint down, we could probably see everybody's face a little bit better.
Oh, okay. Oh, just a minute. I have to.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Jeff, any questions at all for Jeff?
Thank you very much for your attention.
I was just going to say thank you for all the work. It looks great. I walked through there a lot, and I like the pictures you had of all the flowers. It really did look spectacular through the summer. So,
thank you, Steve.
Rita, go ahead.
I just want to say that one of the thoughts related to native plants in particular is that the first year your plants sleep, the second year they creep, the third year they leap. And so what may seem somewhat spare in some of the planting areas will look different in the next year or two for certain, because they establish themselves and they require less maintenance. So that's one of the really cool things about native plants. That's all. Thanks. And I do appreciate the strength of support from Jeff and the other members of the Green team. It's been great.
Thank you, everybody. Take care.
Jeff, thank you so much. Thanks for coordinating and speaking about all the wonderful volunteers and the activism in the community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay. All right, we're going to keep things moving here. If we could go into the next agenda item is the working groups, and these are just updates tonight. And we kicked these off at the last meeting by consolidating the working groups into a couple of broader ones. And so I think I could go first, and then we can turn it over to Rita. And we didn't have a specific item yet, so I think I'm just going to provide some updates on things on the future space design. We have been continuing to meet around the fundraising aspects in particular, and have had some really good engagement, most recently with the Community Foundation and some prospective donors. We continue to build momentum around some of the fundraising, and I think we're off to a good start here for closing out the year in a really strong position. There hasn't been any movement yet around the RFP, but we have previously had conversations with park staff with whom we're going to work around the drafting of that RFP. I think we got a good commitment from them around that engagement earlier, I think probably last month sometime. And so I feel confident that when we get ready to kick that off, providing we continue to build momentum around the funding, that we'll be able to kick that off at the early portions of next year. And so I feel confident in that. We have when we get a little bit closer to that, we'll have more engagement there. But that's where we're at on the future space design, and I will have more formal update around a charge and other things at the next meeting. So, Rita, why don't we turn it over to you, and then we can do any joint questions if there are some.
Sure. So in the short-term activation work group, we're really just getting started, and I appreciate the support from Heather and Adam for looking at some initial discussions of greater detail with Jessica Black and other people in parks on the process that they used and their observations of activities at Liberty Plaza, which I think will be very helpful for us in terms of looking at what we can do, what we could possibly share, and what kinds of materials we might be able to share at the sites. I want to also thank Steve Borgsdorf for walking through and thinking about things as well. And I think we'll be working together more on pulling in other people, some of you, council members, as well as other members of the community that have particular expertise or interests. And I think that we're going to find some really interesting kinds of things that we can do and have some good ideas from the community that we among ourselves right here have not thought of yet. And I'm looking forward to that. So updates to come, but we're starting work this month for sure. Thanks.
Thank you, Rita. Any questions at all for Rita or I? I think we'll have more to discuss at the next meeting on these topics for sure. Alice, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to mention today I was reading something in some, I think it was the Ann Arbor Observer Online, and there was talk about events and stuff like that. And the date that struck in my head was like late January for things that were starting to be planned and announced as events. And that's why I think we really hope to be moving ahead quickly so that we are not delayed in any way just by, we need to start really getting those contacts and engagement with the other people planning events so that we can make sure they have use, potential use of this site or any part of their program. That kind of thing. And lately, the date of late February or April 1st has been mentioned in other aspects. And so it just kind of wanted me to put a little pressure on us to get things moving.
Duly noted. And in that regard, actually, I think there was an article recently, I don't know if it was in the Observer or MLive, around some of the success the city has seen at Liberty Plaza around the activation and some additional activation that we're going to be seeing over this month. And so it's exciting to see the block activated and the popularity clearly based on some of that funding that was invested by the city. Alan, and then Rita.
You do what you want. No. Yes. Excuse my voice. I feel that this process has gone on much too narrowly. In particular, the initiating committee that was set up specifically to carry out and explore the recommendations of the Center of the City Task Force in terms of programming and physical development has not been consulted in any way whatsoever. And while there's discussion about the need for some conservancy of management, as near as I know, the Library Green Conservancy, another from the bottom up group, has not been consulted at all. And this has devolved into a largely staff-driven sense of process. And just one element of that, the task force dealing with Liberty Plaza has, to my knowledge, not included the people who've had some concern in Liberty Plaza. And I think perhaps I mentioned that the tables that were very beneficial for conversation, as for instance, the conversation I was having with the director of the Downtown Development Association that was to be renewed, that table was disappeared. That was also the table that had a long history of chess games and other recreational activities. It was like taking out the one of the central physical elements that allowed people to make that into a social space. And I wish that this process would move much more into the public and the public ideas. There's yet to be any real consultation with the public, and even we'll talk later about the PROS report, but of the consultation that reported in the surveys of 2,900 people, Yeah, maybe 2% of the population, mostly white, mostly rich. This is not a representative process of how to make this area actually a center of the city that is inviting. And the part of the invitation is to invite people to put their ideas and time and talent into it. The commons being commonly pooled resources, self-managed by the people, by the users, and yet some of those resources are what some of it is the land that the city owns that has been designated for this commons purpose, but also it's the talents, the enthusiasm, the experience of people who want to do stuff together. And the idea of working groups of people who want to work on childcare, on playgrounds, on energy issues, on performance and music and art, and so on. That whole aspect of inviting the people who want to do things there and create a very diverse space of both Liberty Plaza, Library Lane itself, and the library lot. That whole element of public participation has been overlooked, I think, because the urgency to somehow get a buy-in from the city administration and the Park Advisory Commission and so on. But really the buy-in that is needed is the participation of people who actually want to come and do stuff there. And so I hope that the next stage of this development will involve much more outreach and invitation of much wider participation. And I think that actually there should be a message sent out to the entirety of the Ann Arbor people. You know, to the extent you think about this, what are the ideas and the commitments and the energy and the talents and perhaps the money or the stuff, the tables and chairs and plants and so on that could be gathered together as commonly pooled resources. We think of all this too much in terms of what do we need and where do we buy it, rather than what do we need and how can we create it. So that's as you know, I'm on that end of the spectrum, that the commons is of the people, and I'm actually re-disturbed that I have not seen in the development of this process people reflecting on what they've learned in their study of what is the commons and how it functions in different places. And we see what a few other cities have done through the instrumentation of their DDAs and so on. But the commons is not by the DDA, it's by the people who use it. So I just want to reemphasize that, and for the next months that we are evolving this plan to look much more to the actual what is the commons and how do people become invited into a process that for the most part we see public activity being exclusive and done as a service to the people, either by the government or by the corporation that wants to make some money out of it. This is a service that people create for the city, for themselves and for everybody else, out of some kind of love and caring and all that kind of wishy-washy stuff. Thank you.
Thanks, Alan. Rita, got the last word here.
Okay, I just want to call everyone's attention to tomorrow night at Liberty Plaza that there is a holiday pop-up event of various vendors that will be available in part of the Midnight Madness holiday weekend. So let's all go out there and see what it's like. That's my wish for everyone. Thank you.
Rita, thank you so much for much more eloquently describing what I was trying to allude to. There is an article, I think it's an MLive regarding that event, if I recall correctly. So neat thing coming up. All right, so that is the working group updates. We're going to move into the PROS plan, and there's an updated link to the PROS plan. I think we've got the latest and greatest draft attached to the agenda. I'd like to, before we get into it, because I think that part of the desire in having a discussion around this tonight, and Heather's going to help guide us through that discussion, is to provide some feedback to the Parks Department during the public comment period. Now, we had originally believed that public comment period extended into January a bit. It does not. It ends a little bit earlier, and we flagged that. So what I'd like to do this evening is take some time and discuss people's initial thoughts. And then I'd like to call a special meeting of this body prior to the close of that deadline to formulate and approve a group recommendation and thoughts to send to Parks. I would prefer not to do all of that in one sitting tonight, because I'd like to give us some time to think about it in between. But I did want to just flag that. It's clear from a number of other pieces of feedback that folks have provided that it would be there's a strong desire to provide some of that feedback, and so I would just like to note that and ask for a level of support to just call that meeting and bring us back together and sign off on something at that point. So with that, Heather, what do you have in mind for this part?
Sure. Well, I think it might just be fair to just take some initial impressions that people have, because I can't imagine that people have had a whole lot of time to read through the document. It is a lengthy planning document, so you probably didn't have an hour or two to spend, reading it bit by bit. But hopefully you've had a chance to glance at it. And so I thought we'd just kind of open it up with just kind of initial impressions. And then I can also answer questions about what the PROS plan is. I do want to make it clear, though, that I'm not speaking on behalf of Parks staff. I don't work for Parks, but if you just have some basic questions about what the function of the Parks plan, then I can provide that information. And then possibly Stephen wants to chime in as well, being a member of PAC. Please feel free to jump in if you'd like to. And I see that Rita has her hand up. Please go ahead.
Thanks, Heather. I do want to call out particularly two things that I noticed, and as did one of our callers tonight, the comparison or the specificity of population within each of the parks planning areas and the acreage of parks available is a kind of a standardized way of looking at parkland, is my understanding. And it is really important, I think, given the density that's being planned for Ann Arbor, that we include that information. It'll make it a really stronger document if it builds on the way it's been approached in the past. And I feel like that is a really essential thing. So there's instead of the table that was described, it would be multiple columns for each of the planning areas, and the appropriate data elements would be filled into that report. And I'm assuming that the information is relatively available since it has a model. The other thing is, I think the overall look at how the community responded to the survey is really important. Also, as called out earlier, we really need to say we're involved in this project, and so let's get it moving. And our project in downtown parks were rated highly. So I think that gives our project some strength, and I'd like to see us build on that. Thanks.
Thank you, Rita. Anyone else have thoughts on PROS? Alice. You're muted.
There we go. I keep trying to do it in the frame, and it's way down in the other corner. I agree with what Rita said, and sort of expanding a little bit on the previous columns, Linda Brower's comments on the PROS plans of the past. We need to have some continuity, and because that's where we can start building. And one of the thoughts I had, without having much look at the pros plan of the moment, but having looked at several in the past, I think that by looking at the options for integrating the Liberty Plaza as a park, a designated park, Kemp House as a special property, in the center of the city, that we're working on to find an appropriate category, I guess, to that would be compatible with those properties and really increase it would integrate these properties, and the cohesiveness would help everything that happens in the block. So instead of just looking at the center of the city, we look at the center of the city as we were charged for the whole block, and how that fits into what exists with the park and the special properties. Maybe someone suggested that we have a park by the ordinance, but we don't. That's a whole different process of designating a park or parkland. That's a zoning issue. So I just wanted to make clear that we have to look at every aspect of what kinds of changes we'd like, or what kinds of emphasis we'd like. And I really appreciate what Linda and Rita have said so far. But that was one of the thoughts that I thought, that if we do this kind of both data-driven and desire-driven, everything will be lifted by what we intend to do with the center of the city.
Thank you, Alice. Frank.
Yeah, I think the only point I want to make is that it's my impression that being properly profiled in this report, which comes out every 5 years, it's really important that the center of the city be appropriately mentioned and recognized for a very important practical reason. Granting organizations want to see activities, reflected in this type of report, and so our opportunities will be greatly enhanced if we are reflected and profiled appropriately in this report going forward. And this is beyond the funding for the study. It's making the study a reality. Its recommendations going forward. So this is critical stuff.
Definitely. And by the way, of course, because we're able to record this evening, we'll capture these comments too and bring them back for the discussion on the recommendation. Steve, you're up.
Thanks. I just wanted to. It'd be odd if I said nothing during this part of the discussion. I have not had a chance to digest this draft such that I feel comfortable making any discussion about the current draft, but I did want to make a few comments about the pros plan. I perused it enough to know that it looks like the ones that came before. Yeah, these are documents that follow a certain pattern, a certain structure. And what I'm going to look for, what it's most interesting to me, is sort of towards the end of the draft. There's all of the data about the community feedback. But there's a wealth of fantastic information in the pros plan, in every pros plan, that explains the budget process, that gives a good the entire inventory of all the parks, exactly what's there, the acreage. So, and that can be very instructive. I mean, I've got my old trusty one from back in 2015 handy. When we're talking about the space or the spaces that we're working with, to have context as to like other spaces that are similar size in the town and so forth. So I commend it to you as a wealth of information, and think that at least, more to come as we digest it. But from my view, a lot of the fun stuff is at the back as you get to the community feedback.
Thank you for that, Steve, and certainly appreciate the insight too. I'm in the same boat. I've got to digest this a little bit more. And so I think, coming into this meeting tonight and talking with a few of you offline, it was clear that strong desire to provide some feedback and but also want to spend a little more time on it. So that's why we made that suggestion earlier about coming back prior to the close of the public comment period.
Yeah, and I just want to chime in a little bit. I think speaking of the data that's gathered specifically from community in this one, there's one of the big themes around what's been gathered is a real desire from the community to see greater investment in our existing parks, sort of a recognition of sort of the level of investment that's needed in our infrastructure and that. And so that's one of the big themes that the Parks Department has seen within this, which speaks a lot to the public-private partnerships that we've been talking about for the future of this. So I think there's a complementary nature to that. I do think it might be useful to be sharing some of the research from the comparable communities piece forward. That would be helpful. And there was one other point that I had thought that I might make in this, but it has slipped my mind. I'll remember it for the next conversation.
All good. I think those are important points too, and of course you can provide any other points too to Heather and others, and just have to make sure we abide by the laws of the Open Meetings Act in terms of conversation offline. So, but certainly would encourage others to do that too. Alice. Okay.
Agreed. And in that respect, we need to repeat the critical dates. I know we'll have to set a date for that additional meeting, but to know exactly what the deadlines for what part of it there are, so that we're not putting extra pressure on somebody to pay attention to facts and recommendations when it's really kind of too late. We don't want to miss the boat.
Absolutely. Heather, will you, I believe it's December 23rd.
It is December 23rd, so we'll have to find a meeting time before then. And I'm sure people will be taking vacation time and other things like that. So we might have just a few options to choose from, but it'll need to be before the 23rd. And I do want to mention that you can send me your individual thoughts if you wanted to, and I can pass it along to park staff. You can also reach directly out to the email address that's given on the website if you just want to make a direct set of suggestions. The meeting for us to have a collective conversation would really be about making a statement as a whole, as the Council of the Commons, and presenting that to park staff as something that's coming from your body as a whole rather than individual members.
Heather, you mentioned the website. What website were you talking about?
It is the Parks website, and let me see if I can pull it up for you while I'm sitting here and give you the address.
Heather, while you're doing that, we'll Alan, go ahead, and then Sarah.
Yeah. Thank you again. I had mentioned before a concern that the PROS plan did not give any reference to the community groups seeking to develop ideas that would be contributory to the overall city policy. But more than that, our conversation has focused entirely on the first element of the proposal A resolution to develop a central park, and the other element is a civic center. And there have been lists circulated of 20-some activities that people consider desirable in the parkplace, and a comparable list also of 20-some elements of social services and civic center functions, meeting hall, a cafe, gallery, a place for the ambassadors of the park to have office. I don't have to go through that list. The civic center function is not simply a redundancy, like there were too many words in the resolution. It is an element of what makes the center of the city. There are many central functions that should be aligned with the development of the Central Park and similarly aligned with the neighborhood institutions, particularly the downtown district library. So when we were looking for the request for proposals, there are multiple ideas that have not been, it seems to me, forwarded into that process as to what does the civic center look like. I've considered that it looks like some kind of building or collection of buildings that might be part of the rebuilt Martin Place, the Noble House, the increased functions in the library, and some new building over Library Lane. Those are all elements that we should have evaluated in terms of their benefit and their cost and how they can be financed, which is a significant matter. But to ignore it because it is a significant matter and not just a park is not appropriate. And I wish that all the people on our collective council here would look to the wider definition of what would constitute the center of the city, not just a park, but a park, a civic center, organized as a commons where the users of the services and activities have a significant role in determining their management. That's what a commons is. And there's much literature to help stimulate the beautiful imagination is what we could do in the center of the city. But that element has been sidestepped or neglected for various reasons that we're just trying to get something done and keep some momentum or whatever it is. But it is a park and a civic center, and it has a variety of indoor and outdoor functions. Thank you.
Thanks, Alan. Sarah, and then we will turn it back to Heather just so that folks can make sure they get the website.
She just emailed it out, actually. I just wanted to quickly mention that park staff came and presented the pros plan to the Planning Commission a month or so ago. And one of the primary discussions that we had was about integrating the 10-minute walk campaign that the Trust for Public Land leads. So I think they're going to look at creating maps of like 10-minute walk sheds around the existing parks, but we might want to reinforce that in our comments because I think that would really help illustrate particularly if they could note some of the like new housing areas downtown. I think that could help us sort of see where we're lacking park space in the city overall. I also have not really dug into this, even though I probably should have for that meeting. But as you're going through it, they're numbering, like, because I was trying to use their table of contents and like, don't look at that because their numbering was all off. So they need to fix that. And it was driving me crazy trying to like find certain sections. So just do a search and find, I guess, if you're looking for something specific, don't use the table of contents.
Thank you for that. And I think the 10-minute walk idea is a really, really neat one. Certainly it'll speak to some of the relationship between housing density and parks that Rita was mentioning earlier. So, okay, Heather, I turn it back to you. Close us out on this topic.
Sure. I just sent the website to your email because that'll be a little bit easier for you than me reading it out loud here. But that should be a link in your email. So you can go to that website and get a link to the plan. It's also linked to our agenda. So you can find it in both places. But there's an email on that website, and that's one of our parks planners. So you can write to her if you have any feedback that you want to provide directly. Again, if we want to provide a statement as a body, as Council of the Commons, then you can send that to me after we talk about it. You can send that to me, and then I will send that along to park staff. So with that, Yeah, again, there's a couple cleanup things you'll see in the document that was just mentioned, some of the numbering and typos and things like that. So you're welcome to provide comment on that, but really the more important thing is the substance. So, and really just thinking about what Frank was saying, how you think the center of the city should be appropriately characterized and addressed in the plan. So that's what we want to get at with our statement back to them.
So I think certainly, obviously, folks are more than welcome to provide personal statements. We do want to get back together and do a collective statement. So the feedback to Heather in particular, please do that so that we could try and work on it beforehand. But then we will come back and have a discussion and prior to the close of that period. So.
By what does it depend on when we have that meeting? When we should get our own contributions into Heather?
I would say, why don't we try and give ourselves a deadline of about a week or so to take a look through the plan and provide some feedback to Heather, and that will give us, if we shoot for a week to 10 days for that, that'll give us plenty of time to work on scheduling that meeting ahead of the holidays. I imagine we'll get pretty close to the deadline, but we'll still be able to meet it.
I should also mention that this group is not required to make a statement. It's just that if you want to. So, I do want to emphasize this. If you don't have anything that you feel like should be said, then that's fine too.
Totally.
Yes, and you did mention that our individual contributions to the comments are just fine.
Right.
And, but I think it will be good for us to have some sense of our own discoveries and help that will help us move forward more quickly.
Totally. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I considered the individual statements as well.
Could you clarify what this December deadline is actually?
Yeah, the December deadline is the close of the open comment period, December 23rd. And then it goes through a series of approval processes. So we integrate our parks plan into our comprehensive plan. So it actually does go through our planning commission, which Sarah mentioned. So, and that there's a public hearing that's required for that. And then it goes up to city council. So, and it has to be into the Michigan Department of Recreation, the Michigan Department of Natural Resources in February. So that's the ultimate deadline. It has to be to them, to be approved by them, to be eligible for the funding sources that they provide.
And is it still true that it has to be sent to the local governments around the county?
Correct. And that's this comment period right now. So at the beginning, whenever you do a comprehensive plan, there's the neighboring jurisdictions as well as utilities and railroad, other entities. You have to provide a notice that you are starting a planning effort. And then once you get a draft of the plan, you provide that back out to all of those entities to review. And so that's where it's at right now. It's out there with them and then out to the general public to provide comment.
Got two hands up here, Councilmember Briggs and then Frank.
Yeah, I was just, since there's discussion of another meeting, I know that sometimes those meetings can get a little unwieldy at times. And if really the point is to have a very brief, I guess there could be lengthy comments from the commission, but, very sort of specific guidance around this commission's desires. It seems like it might be more helpful to have a smaller, having you and Alice, for example, taking a look at this and providing something that the commission could react to or something like that, rather than having sort of everybody send their individual comments in to Heather and having her have to sort through that and figure out what is really, just because somebody sent in comments, that doesn't mean that's necessarily how we should spend a subsequent meeting. Because it seems like our individual comments should probably go directly to the Parks Commission in through that website and in through that forum. And if there's some very specific reason for us to meet because there's some major gap in this, then I would hope that as leadership, you're able to identify that and bring us back together only if that's really necessary.
Right.
Yeah.
I agree. The that wordsmithing as a group is not a good way to spend the time.
Totally agree with both of those sentiments. I think the thought would be that it's probably a good idea to create a straw person document, if you will, and then make sure that there's some eyes on it and in the public sphere. But certainly hear you around the group wordsmithing. So understand your statement there. Frank, and then I think we will try and wrap it up unless there's anybody else.
Basically, I just want to echo what Erica just said. I think it's important that some work be done between now and another gathering so that we have something substantive to react to rather than to try to create it during that meeting.
Yes.
And I just think it's critical that this council have a statement on this document and in some detail of how we feel it could be improved by our suggestions.
Now, I'd like for us to be able to view it as a contribution rather than a statement or demand, because we need to be listening as well as telling.
I agree with that too.
Excellent point. Good way to close us out and take us into that next part. So please do provide the feedback. You could send it to Alice, myself, if you want, as well as Heather. We do want to be conscious that we're not conversing over it, but we will take it and come up with something for you to react to and get back to you as well. Okay. All right. With that, that takes us to the next agenda items, appropriately labeled. I think we've kind of got that for the next meeting, unless there's anything else that folks would like to add. And with that, we will go into public comment and see if there's anybody else from the public who would like to add anything. Heather?
Yeah, Robert Black. Go ahead.
Robert's name is transcribed as Robert Luck.
Robert, are you able to? We cannot hear you if you're speaking.
Unmute. Unmute.
He appears to be unmuted, but maybe having some technical difficulties.
Oh wait, 3 is. Oh yeah, okay.
Robert, any luck there? Heather, is there anyone else? Maybe we can come back to Robert and that'll dislodge it.
Nobody else with their hand up at the moment.
Okay. Robert, let me try muting you and then unmuting you here. Does that do anything? Huh. Well, our apologies, Robert. Cannot hear you at all.
Maybe he should submit his comments to Heather as well.
Yeah.
That works. If you would like to send your comments in, please feel free.
Wait, so I thought I heard somebody.
*6, isn't that it?
*9 if you're on the phone.
Okay.
And that's just to virtually raise your hand.
How do you unmute though? Isn't there a second combo?
Robert?
He is unmuted.
Yeah, he's unmuted.
Okay.
Robert, if you want to go ahead and send your comments in, please feel free. Obviously, we would be more than happy to take a look at them. Apologies that we can't seem to get your voice recognition to work here. Okay. Well, in that case, we'll close out public comment and go to an adjournment. Can we have a motion to adjourn the meeting this evening?
So moved.
3 of them.
Right, got a few. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. We'll get back with you around the date and the document. Alice and I have our homework, so we appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Send in those